Success Talk. Today we're going to be discussing more techniques as to how you can improve your career path, whether you are looking for a career, already in a career, but to get yourself into that high performance level. And with me is Abbass Zadeh again.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for having me back. I must be on a roll.
How are you feeling today?
Yeah, all good. All good.
Very good.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so some more success techniques. What is your thoughts so far about what we've discussed?
I think we've discussed some really good points. And I think the viewers that are watching should be able to pick up on a certain number of things that will be able to help them in their home lives and in their careers. So I think the one thing that's stuck with me, really, that I use a lot is self-talk. Is to be able to talk to myself and to have an idea on where I'm going, what I'm doing, what happened so well, what didn't work so great, or what I need to work on.
Really
so
important.
I think very, very important.
Very
and I think if
important.
people start to do that a lot, in their own time, in their own comfort.
You can coach yourself.
Absolutely, 100%.
Really
it helps a lot.
Okay, so one of the techniques I want to discuss today is one of a strategy that we use in coaching.
Okay.
I do this with all my clients when we get to a certain point, and especially if they're having problems with another person or issues,
Okay.
whether it's in the workplace or in relationships, siblings, doesn't have to be romantic. And it's called the Be Me success technique, or in coaching it's perceptual positioning, or it's called the 3-chair exercise. So as a coach, I will lay 3 chairs. Just bear with me, I'm going to explain this obviously. And one of them is that you sit on that chair to be yourself and air out whatever issues that you have. Then you move on to the next chair. And if you, for example, discussing, the colleague at work that you having issues with, you become them. And so whatever, issues that you've just discussed, you pretend that you are going to be that person and you respond back. So you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, basically. And then you move on to the 3rd chair, and then you become like someone who is giving feedback for the whole situation. And that is one visual way of looking at it from a different perspective, because sometimes we get so caught up in how we feel, and we get so caught up in how, we think, that we forget that even though that person's annoying us or whatever, but when you sit in that chair with that person's persona, trying to pretend to be them, sometimes even in a funny way, you can actually understand, well, actually, they don't really mean it like that. That's just them. Or actually, no, that's something serious.
I get that. I think it's quite
really
a hard thing to do.
But that's why you do it with a coach.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
So this is something that I think that I use, and I then obviously, come in there and question. When they're taking themselves in these different sort of, personas and taking upon themselves, then as a coach, I come in and I question, so that they're aware that they're sitting in this position with that particular personality, and if they're like, having arguments and that person's responding, for example, in relationship coaching, they take on the husband's role, the wife takes on the, whatever, vice versa. And they can be each other. And when they become each other, they take on that role. Sometimes it starts off being like a pretense, as in making fun of them, that they will respond in that way. But then afterwards they realize that where that person might be coming from.
Yeah.
So it's a very powerful way. Even like for serious cases, like when children are being bullied, and you make them sit down, and you as a parent can do that if, you feel that they have an interaction that's not positive with a friend of theirs. And you make them sit down and say, well, this is what your story is. Now go sit there and be your friend and now respond. And sometimes they may realize that actually it's not that serious, or it is serious, and there's something that needs to be taken forward. And it's really powerful, and it really works. And I know that it might seem like, oh, it's so obvious, we can just do it in our heads where we can be empathetic, but we can't. Because when I've practiced this and people have sat, experiencing this situation in this sort of, strategy, in this technique, it actually brings out a different understanding, a real understanding for someone. While I was training as a coach, I had another colleague of mine who volunteered herself to actually do this exercise in front of all of us. And my trainer was there, obviously in charge, and she was complaining about her mother-in-law. And she sat there, as herself. And then when she took the role of her mother-in-law, she even, sort of frowned and frumped and, sat like this, like how a mother-in-law would sit. You know what I'm trying to say? And we all laughed and whatever. And she did exactly that. And then when the coach was asking her questions or helping her, and she was answering like her mother-in-law, And then tears came down because then she realized that, she was just talking from her mother-in-law's perspective, and there was a lot deeper understanding there. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And even in the workforce, we have characters that we have to come across all the times that we're not going to get along with, and it's worse when they're above you, or or just colleagues that you have to see every day. So I do coach people to get along with these sort of characters, which are quite overbearing. Not everyone's confident, and if you're confident, you don't always have to be loudly confident. You're quietly confident. So I mean, how do you deal with these situations when you're at work? Maybe you can use this.
Definitely never use that technique. It's obviously one that you've just brought to my attention now. I think from my previous jobs, being a manager and managing a team of like nearly 30, 40 people, when I was working for certain brands, and you had conflicts within the work environment.
All these egos.
All these egos, and you had apprentices that were younger, that were, some of them still very childish, and they were being trained up by men in their 30s, 40s or 50s that take pride and passion in what they do. And then you had these kids that were trying to learn but still trying to have a laugh. And it was when you sat them down and you were trying to listen to both sides of the story, to try and get an understanding of what people were thinking. It is hard. I mean, that technique sounds great. I mean, I'm hoping I'd never have to do it in my place of work with members of staff, and I'm hoping like the team will be able to make it work without that. But I think that's something that definitely could work.
But you could liquid it down. It doesn't have to be exactly like how I've said with the 3 chairs or whatever. Because even if you're talking to one of your employees and they actually do have a sort of like some sort of, I don't know, dilemma or whatever it may come across, then you can sit them down and say, okay, I've heard your side. Even though that person's not here, let's see what they would answer. And you tell me first, what do you think their response is? So without you realizing, you put them in that situation already.
Absolutely.
You can be smart about it.
Absolutely.
Whatever I've been talking about, you make it your own, you use it the way you want, and you don't even have to have a coach to do that. But now that you're aware of this, you can do that. And our parents do that when they, dealing with their siblings, for example. When their children have sibling issues or whatever it may be, from a young age to adulthood even, you can use that technique. It's very, very useful. And I think that we always think that, we're very understanding and we're empathetic. We're not. We don't really put ourselves in other people's situations, and we just judge. And these can cause damaging sort of like effects in the later on, especially in business, if we're not actually understanding other people and putting ourselves in that situation. And it's not because we're also self-centered. It's just life's busy. So we need to take ourselves out of these situations, and we can do it ourselves, for ourselves. When we are faced with certain situations where we don't like, or we don't like that person being and acting, and we don't understand why they're being that way. Sometimes let's just sit in that sort of place where they would sit, how they would sit. Sometimes just using their own way of sitting and breathing and talking. Just like you smiled when you saw me frumping, because you can imagine you putting yourself in someone else's position and doing exactly that. And that brings a whole different sort of like, understanding.
Yeah, no, definitely, it makes sense. And I think you can only try and have an understanding on somebody's thought process. Or somebody's way of looking at you or thinking about you in a certain type of way when you actually start to think like that they do. And you think like they do when you start acting like they do. So no, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought of it that way. But it's definitely a technique that could work. And I think whether it be a place of work, whether it be in a home life, parents, as children.
Definitely.
Now, I think the one thing that I knew I had like difficulties growing up with is because my parents obviously were here for a very long time before I was born. But their mentality and their mindset and their culture is very much back home for them. So going into my teenage years and I was acting in a certain way, it was new for them. And they was like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you going there after school? Why are you speaking to this person? Why are you acting like that? Where it's like, hold on, it's a complete different day and age to what it was for you. So try and step into my shoes, but at the same time, I'd have to try and step into their shoes to have an understanding on the way that they see things and the way that they thought about it.
It's not just about you just stepping into their shoes to make them understand, but also it can change your behavior as well. You don't realize by looking at a different perspective or learning someone else's habit, even if you don't agree, it can actually change your ways yourself, and which is what we want to do, is to have success is to have, change behavior, successful change behavior, positive change behavior, because we have increased our understanding, increased our awareness.
Correct.
So this rolls over nicely onto the next technique, which is kind of similar, but it's more personal. Instead of you trying to take yourself and put yourself into someone else's shoes, it's called the step outside technique. So it's more about, again, understanding and analyzing yourself and your behaviors and your conversation and your situation and your ego and your confidence, and to fix it up.
Okay.
So always taking it to the next level, stepping up, basically.
Okay.
Okay. So whoever we think we are right now and whatever we're trying to be, we need to always strive to be higher, better, and more. So it's like a growth process within yourself. When you step outside, it's not looking from a different perspective, it's about improvement. So constantly trying to improve yourself, trying to build yourself, trying to make yourself, push yourself to the next level, basically. Do you do that sometimes, or do you find yourself that you need that push? It's hard to do it for yourself, right?
It is hard to do it for yourself, and I think majority of the time I feel like I need that push, and I get that push again by speaking to yourself as my coach, or speaking to friends sometimes, or just discussing something which has either brought me down or whatever it is to give me that push. I do try to do it myself.
But you said you like to be alone. So when you step outside yourself and when you're alone, you're stepping outside yourself, but you're just taking yourself into a different environment, and then you bring yourself back. So talk me through that process when you're by yourself.
So I think when I'm by myself, the thought process is to be able to think like, what it is has got me to that level. Why am I here? Why do I feel this certain type of way? Why am I acting in this way? And why is these feelings are there? So when you do step out of that zone, and when I am by myself, you slow everything down in your brain and your mind, and you start to think things through properly, and you start to work it out. It's as if you've just done an equation and you know the answer, but you're trying to work out, how did I get to that answer?
Okay.
Well, like when you're doing you're
quite analytical, right?
Yeah.
You analyze a lot. Not many people do that.
Yeah, so you try to analyze on how you got there.
Okay.
So if it's a deal that I missed out on from business, I sit there and I think, why didn't I get that? Why did so-and-so get that? And why didn't I get that? Is it because of the way that I presented it? Is it because of my assets? Is it because of my fleet? What is it? So you have to analyze it. So stepping out of that zone sometimes and being able to analyze it for yourself is a big key, because if you do analyze it yourself and then you find the answer yourself, there is no better feeling to think, you know what?
Absolutely
I know where I went wrong.
Yeah.
I know what I need to do to put it right. And I'm going to make sure I'm not going to do the same to get back to that stage again. It's obviously a massive help if you get somebody to analyze it and help you analyze it.
Even if you get the help, but again, you use those techniques on your own a lot of the times once you've learnt it. And also, when you're talking, I realize that a lot of this self-talk or this analysis that you give yourself, or even you thinking, it comes from pause. And we don't pause enough.
No, absolutely.
We don't give ourselves time. We're always rushing to the next and the next.
And when you think about it,
really
everybody has a busy life.
Yes.
Everybody has a busy schedule. If you're a mother, you've got your kids and you've got work and you've got lunches and you've got dinners and you've got breakfast, you've got everything, you have no time. If you're a father, you've got your own job, you've got to be able to spend time with your kids, you've got to be able to spend quality time with your partner. There's a lot of things that everybody lives a busy life. If you're a businessman and you have multiple businesses, I know people that have multiple businesses and they run A, B, C, and D, 4 businesses very, very, very well. But you do find that they get tired quite quickly. So you need to be able to make time for yourself.
Yeah.
And when you make time for yourself and you'll be able to slow it down, look at things, and if you look at things from a different perspective, as you said, sat in a different chair, from a different point of view, sometimes you do that not because, even if there is nothing wrong, still look at it from a different perspective, not because you should care what other people think, because you're your own person and that shouldn't affect you, but it will help you self-develop.
Yes.
It will help you self-develop, and it will help you go,
it'll help you process whatever information's in your mind.
okay, so I'm sat here, I've just done this, and my coach, Fahima, you would have said to me, look at it this way, look at it that way. So hold on a minute, let me just sit and look at it in this direction. Okay, then it helps you build and develop yourself. And
have you gone slower in your ways of thinking and acting?
Oh, 100%, 100%. I never ever slowed down and stopped to think. And I remember in my previous job, my one of my directors, she always used to say to me, whenever we were discussing something and I was really upbeat and I was hyped and I was like, I want to do this, I want to do this. It was usually when I wanted to spend money. She'd go, whoa, slow down,
Yeah.
stop, take a deep breath, start at A again, and then give me all the bullet points for A before you jump onto B, C, and D. I'm usually the type of person that I go with instincts,
Yeah,
gut
gut
feeling, and I
feeling,
run with something.
Yeah, which is nothing wrong with that.
Again, which is nothing wrong.
Yeah.
I believe I am where I am and my business is where it is. I mean, a lot of it has been on gut instincts. But there are times that you have to just slow down and you have to go, whoa, okay.
Yeah, let's just look at this a little bit
Look
more
at it in more
deeper.
depth,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. One thing I learned when I first started coaching, the first thing I realized, that I always listened to people and I didn't listen to them. I was always listening to them and I never concentrated because I was always thinking about the response that I needed to give them.
I've heard that before where people say you don't listen to
but I
listen,
actually did it.
you listen to respond.
I did it, and that was my first switch and adjustment that I made for myself. And I realized I wasn't having to worry about my answers then and my responses when I was constantly listening, and even as a coach training. Like I was, worried, well, how am I going to question and what questions am I going to ask and am I going to miss it? But when you're actually with that person sitting there and listening to them, you're with them and they feel it. And at the same time, it's just automatic that you will just respond to whatever you need to respond to. But you're responding correctly because it's with greater understanding, because you're not in your own mind, you're actually with the other person. And I think it's really important when you're in conversations with yourself, and analyze that when you're in conversation with somebody else, is to really listen. Really listen intently with their frame of mind, of where they're coming from, instead of like, oh, I know what they're going to say, and I'm thinking now in my mind how
I'm going to answer it. Yep.
And then the next technique is break the word. Now, what do I mean by this? We talk about language and we talk about the way we talk. And I'm guilty of it myself, even as a practicing coach. And I might give even the best advice, and sometimes I have to take them myself, and it's always the way. Even, you'll find chefs, really top chefs, but they will talk about health and nutrition, and yet they don't look like they actually are conforming to it. But that's no excuse. However, I try and be as congruent as I can and practice what I preach. So this is one of the techniques, is to be aware of your words, like always, every time, possibly, and break that word into getting more specific. Because when you are specific with your language, it then relays in your actions, and then it serves you better. So you sometimes, again, I'm saying sometimes, but if you were to give a story, it makes more sense to explain to somebody something than to generalize. It depends, obviously, in which context you're using it.
Sure.
But it's something to consider, to break down your words and be more specific. When you are more specific, that means you're clearer in your mind.
Yes.
So your language, and especially things like sometimes, possibly, every time, which is neither here or there, that sort of language, when someone says to you and responds to you in that way, you immediately are not drawn to them. So when you're in business and you want to be successful and you want to sell something and you want to talk, or you want to just be, opening up a pitch to somebody, your specific language is important.
100%. You need to use the right wording. And I don't know, I could be wrong, you can correct me here, but I also do think that's got to do with a little bit of confidence also as well. In business, when it comes to pitching,
I would say more belief than confidence.
Okay, belief, if not the word confidence, because especially in pitching or in business, if you're going to sell a product, as much as I'm my own company owner and I funded my business and all of that stuff and I've got it going, the one show that I love watching is The Apprentice.
Yeah, same.
Because on a weekly basis, you pick up and you learn so much, where you think somebody, and you can tell from the character, somebody that has so much belief in what they're doing, somebody that lacks a little bit of belief, but they've got the hunger, but they're too scared, or they don't have the confidence to be able to come out and say it. But I think definitely the wording is 100% there, especially in business element. If I'm going to go in and I'm going to pitch something and I'm going to use the words sometimes, occasionally, rather than, of course we can, every single time, all the time.
That's the thing, you're more definite.
You're more definite, and that's where they'll go, okay, this is somebody who is confident, this is somebody who has a lot of belief in what they're selling to us, because You can't sell something to somebody
Without
if you don't believe in it yourself.
I always say that, yes, absolutely.
Whether it be if I wanted to sell you this glass of water, or whether I wanted to sell you that piece of paper, if I didn't believe in my actual own product, I'm gonna struggle to sell that to you.
Definitely.
I could just tell you, oh yeah, it's water, I took it out of that bottle, or it could be right, it's this fresh water that came from the mountain, there's this, you add more emphasis to it, you add more belief to it. I could sell this more than somebody else can sell a different type of water because so on and so forth. You need to have belief, confidence in what you're saying, and you need to be very careful with the wording you use. And we used this on the previous show when you were talking about the wordings that we use, and we said not how you say it, but not what you say, but how you say it. But sometimes it is more important about what it is that you're saying, the words that you use. So it has a massive impact.
Hand in hand.
Whether it be business or whether it be in a personal relationship.
When you're going for an interview especially, I want people to be aware that, that if they're selling themselves as well, when they're talking, they think, oh, we know ourselves, we can just say it. No, practice. Actually record it and you'll pick it up. Because I know, I watch myself and I say so many things that are incorrect and I keep saying, in my shows. And everyone's like, why do you keep saying that? It's a habit. Yes, and I have to break that. But you sit in this corner and you sit on the other side. It's a different story.
Absolutely.
And even watching The Apprentice, it's really hard to sort of pick up what you said.
But just on that point, as you say, you go and you watch yourself. It's not because you're going back just to watch the show for the sake of watching the show. You're going back to relearn. Because in next month's time or in 2 months' time, when you're going to do a show with a different individual and you're going to sit down, you've self-developed.
Yes.
Because you've gone back, you've watched your own work and you've realized what you've said, where you might have not said something that you didn't want to say or it was wrong. That's all self-development. And it's like when you achieve something in your life, whether it be from a business or a personal, or if somebody really wants to start a family and then they have a kid, or if they really want to get somewhere in business, you go back and you look at the process and then you learn from that process.
That's reflection,
It's reflection. It's like, why are kids different, or why do mothers or parents, fathers treat kids differently, the first one to the second to the third? Because at each stage you've stopped and you've looked back and you've gone, okay, I did this with this first kid and he turned out to be cheeky and he got away with a lot. So the second kid, or with business, you'll be like, right, I bought this one car and this car didn't do me too well because I did X, Y, and Z with it. So with the second one, I'm going to do this. Or my first business, I made amazing money at this side of the year, but that side of the year I failed. So my second business, I'm going to make sure I do it all the way around. And that, again, that's just reflection. And whether you're reflecting yourself or you're sat down and you're reflecting it with your coach.
Well, that was great. Just, learning how, all these techniques do actually come to play in so many areas in our lives. But again, we've come to the end of this episode. And we normally towards the end, we kind of like, sort of like keep continuing that we can talk forever for another 20, 30 minutes. Yeah. But we do have another one to go through next week, hopefully.
Okay.
And we will be back with more techniques. And thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.